Hello and welcome everybody to the School of Atelier Arts. My name is Mandy Tice. I am the director of the School of Atelier Arts. And today we are going to talk about how to paint more complex subjects. In particular, we're going to talk about how do we paint lace today. So you can see that I have this Velasquez master copy set up, and we're going to talk about what techniques and tools he's using to make this read as a really textured lace without a lot of detail. He's using edge work and shape to create the illusion of lace here. So that's what we're going to learn from Velasquez today. And we're going to go through the process and recreate these effects over here in our master copy today. I'm so happy to have you all joining. Welcome, welcome. Good morning from upstate New York. Excellent. Glad to have you here. Please give a hello in the chat. I always love seeing where everybody's from and getting our community going. Oh, and I have my first Twitch streamer saying hello. I'm now streaming to Twitch as well. So good morning. Happy to have you here. Okay, so what we're going to do is we are going to get our palette set up and start working on this lace. So we are going to have an hour today, so we're going to get as far as we can. But it's not as complex as you might think. This is really, there's lots of ways to approach different textures in painting. The temptation, especially with lace, is to like draw every little detail, right? Give every little in and out, every little bit. But this is reading as lace, but when you look closely, there isn't every little detail. He's creating these effects by being careful with the shape, by being careful with the value contrast, and being considerate about the edge work here. This is more or less one big color with a tiny bit of variation maybe at the top. What's making it read like lace are these things that we're going to talk about today. Okay, so without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, this is my basic palette. I use this to paint most things. You know, some people, they change their palette every painting, but I feel like that's just using up and burning a lot of energy that's unnecessary. I encourage my students to develop a system for everything. The more systems that you have for painting, the more you can spend thinking about what you need to do, and the less time you have to spend, you know, looking on your palette hunting for the right color. All right. So this palette, I have a titanium white, a cad yellow, cad red, ultramarine blue, and an ivory black. Keep in mind, if you're new to oil painting, that the paint goes on the outside of your palette and the inside of your palette is for mixing. And also, I find, again, having a system of where to put my paint on the palette, outside edge, and I also arrange from light to dark. So I arrange my palette by value. I always know where my colors are, because if it's a light color, it's going to be around here, medium around here, and dark around here. Now my ultramarine blue is sliding, so I'm going to smush it down a little bit so we don't have a disaster in the studio. I was once mixing a giant tube of paint, like a neutral color. I decided I wanted to have a giant tube of neutral. And so I had my giant palette knife, and I mean, it was so much paint. It was like piled up to here on my palette, mixing. And I had this giant palette knife, and the palette knife kind of stuck, and the whole pile of paint went somewhere. And I swear I never found it. I have no idea, whatever. And it was a giant blob of paint. Like you could just feel it. And then you look and it was never to be found. So be careful with your when mixing. You might end up with a lost blob of paint somewhere in your studio. Okay. Especially when it's oily like this and you're holding it up, sometimes they'll migrate right off your palette and you won't notice. So if you just smush it down a little bit, it'll stay. Okay, last Monday, we did a little bit of color matching on this, right? So we made this neutralized green over here. And so I'm not gonna go through the process. I'm gonna mix it up really quickly. If you're wondering how I get this color, there's a whole lesson from last Monday that you can watch. You know, I will show you my palette while I'm doing it, but basically I'm gonna start with my green. I'm just gonna go through it really quickly. And I want to neutralize it. The opposite of green on the color wheel is red. So I'm going to neutralize it by starting to add some red into that green. Now, when you first add red to the green, it starts looking like red instead of green, but don't worry, it's still actually green. Sometimes our mind plays tricks on us. If we're thinking verbally the color red, then all of a sudden we see it as red and not green. If you're new to color theory and color mixing and you're like, oh, I'm so confused, it was green and now it's red, that's perfectly normal because anything that's neutralized actually has a red, a yellow, and a blue in it. And it's just a matter of what the proportions are. So unless it's a pure chroma note, it's going to be slightly neutralized, which means there's a red, a yellow, and a blue in every color. Okay. Okay, so I have my neutralized green, but this actually has like quite a bit more red in it, and it's a little bit lighter. So I'm going to add a little bit of white and a touch more red. Okay, and do you see how we're getting a lot closer to the color? So one of my first recommendations when painting, do you see how we're sneaking up on it? It even has a little bit more red and maybe even a tiny bit more yellow in here. It's kind of has a little bit of an orangey undertone to it. So even though we're painting the lace, sometimes, and this is a great trick, especially if you're painting an eye and a portrait, instead of thinking, oh, I need to paint the lace, paint around the lace and then the lace will emerge, right? Because this is so heavily based on shape. We're going to get a lot out of it if we actually, just paint the dark part. It's going to start looking like white lace as soon as we get this contrast down here. Okay, so this is the lighter color that we have. It's still a little bit more red. It's a very, very neutralized green. Okay, so we're sneaking into this ballpark here. I'm going to rotate you guys just a little bit more so you can see. Okay, so you can see how we're sneaking up on this color. If it's disappearing, it means you're close, right? When you squint your eyes and look at it when you're holding it over what you're trying to match. Obviously, this is not a match for the white, but do you see how it starts to disappear, especially in this area here? So I have the lighter color. There's also a darker neutralized green. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this aside and I'm going to make the darker version as well. So I'm just going to take a little bit of this, mix some black. Now, black is going to do two things. It's going to darken the value, and it's also going to neutralize the paint. Black, remember, there's no such thing as black. Black is just a very, very dark blue. And so it's actually going to help us maintain the green using black to darken our paint because black is a dark blue. Okay. All right, so I have a slightly darker color. It still needs some red in there. So it's dark, but it's still a reddy green. And when I added the black, it made it more of a bluey green. And we need a little more red in that dark and a little bit more black as well. Because the red lightened it, right? So whenever you add something, it's going to affect the value, the chroma, and the hue. So you have to be mindful to check in and make sure that it's not being skewed more than you want it to be when you're adjusting. Okay. Okay, so what I'm going to do first is I'm going to lay down and just kind of define the edge with drawing. So again, if we're painting lace, one of our great tools is shape, right? This is an unusual shape. This shape is going to read like lace, even if we paint it neon pink, right? So more than anything else, the shape is doing the heavy lifting on making this believable. So if we want lace to look believable, we need to be careful with the shape. Now, there's a lot of detail here, and we want to be careful not to genericize. So whenever you have something that's repeating, so this looks like triangle, 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 up, down, kind of this sawtooth shape. What students tend to do is make each one of these the same, right? But we need the specificity of shape to really sing here. And that means we have to treat each one, it's its own special little snowflake, each one of these little pieces. It's so tempting as a student to just go, wee, 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 wee. We don't want to take the time to be specific. Now we are, on a bit of a timeline today. So I'm thinking I'm just going to work in one area today. So I think I'll focus on working in this section here. So I'll do these two triangles, again, which are each uniquely shaped. So as I kind of get in here, now I'm always admonishing my students, use a brush that's the right proportion to what it is that you want to paint. So if you are doing this small detail work with the specificity of shape, you want a smaller brush. When it comes to filling in this wider area, I can switch to a larger brush. But when I'm focused on shape, which is what our assignment is today, I'm going to use a smaller brush. And it looks like this is a little dark. I need to add a little, it's a little dark in value. Do you see how this is a little bit lighter over here? We also have one of those days where we have clouds going through, so it's really sunny and then really shady. We're working on a master copy. If you ever have a day like this where it's like light, dark, this is a natural light studio. I am new to the studio. I'm still kind of finagling my curtains and getting things sorted. But if you ever have a day that's really frustrating, lighting wise, especially if you're using natural light, it's a great day to do a master copy. It doesn't matter if it gets lighter or darker because the relative relationship between these two things stays the same. Whereas when you're looking at a still life object, we're getting drastic changes. Okay, so I, again, am trying to be specific here. Make sure that I have the lighter value. This brush might be just a touch small, we'll see. Okay, so, I have transferred this to a canvas. So I'm not drawing, from scratch. I did a transfer. Some people say doing a transfer is cheating, but for me, when I'm teaching, like I don't want to spend all the time teaching how to draw this if the point of the lesson is to paint. And today's point of the lesson is to paint, right? So I feel that it's a perfectly valid way to practice the thing that you're intending to practice. If the point of making this master copy is that you wanted to learn lace, then don't spend all your time working on the other parts of it, right? Okay, so I want to be careful here. So we have this color here, and then of course it gets darker and a little bit more red as it tucks under here. So we are working on the shape, but now we're also adding in value. Basically, this dark underneath the white of the lace is what's going to create a lot of effect of the lace. So we started with shape, and now we're adding value considerations in here. Okay, and then it, of course, transitions back to our lighter color. And again, being really mindful about how this piece is its own shape, this piece is its own shape. Don't cheat. If you genericize it, you'll lose the feeling of believability, especially when painting lace. That's true for anything with a repeating pattern. Nothing in the three-dimensional world is actually even if it was machine made, right? Because we're seeing it from a specific angle, it's going to get distorted through perspective. It's going to get distorted because it's laying across the form, whatever it is. So look for the ways that it's different. Okay. All right, so you can see that we're starting to get the feeling of this piece already. Now, I overpainted the shape on this side, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix up my white and push back the other way. Now, there's no such thing as white, just like there's no such thing as black. So white is just a really, really light value, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple. In this case, this appears to be a really light value neutralized orange. So I'm going to start with some white on my palette. And I'm going to add a little bit of red and yellow. The opposite of orange is blue. I'm going to add a touch of blue just to neutralize it. So I still want it to read orange, but just as a neutralized orange. And probably a touch more here. And it's a little bit of a red orange. I want it to read a little more as a yellow orange. That was too much yellow. Now it's looking green. So add a little bit more red back in. You know, people see white and they just want to throw down white paint. It's not white. It's a specific color, just really light in value. And whenever you have a color that's light in value, it can be really difficult to identify exactly what color it is. I have a little bit of extra paint because I need to lighten this quite a bit. So I'm going to split my pile off. I'm going to do so again because we need just a little bit of this color in here. Just a slight bit of neutrality in that. Okay. So this is still feeling a little orange. I'm going to put just a hint of blue in here. There we go. Do you see how that's starting to make it look like a white instead of a orange? It's hard because it's a really light value, but it still has neutrality to it. All right, so I'm feeling pretty good about that color for this part of our lace. So again, we're still thinking shape. We're tackling one aspect at a time. Oh, we have Scotland in the chat. Welcome, welcome. And I'm very happy to be teaching this. Thank you for joining us today. So happy to see you. So we're working on the shape here because we know that shape is a really important part of what's going to make this lace read. So I'm going to go ahead and just adjust this shape because my dark kind of overpowered. It got a little off track over here. So I'm going to make sure that, you know, I'm pushing it back, you know, that dark bit. I'm wiping my brush off, just trying to get the cleanest note that I can, pushing that way. And I'm going to go ahead and fill in this shape. Now, those of you who've been working with me for a while, you know that whenever we have two colors meeting, that we are going to have an edge, right? So we can't just lay this in here willy-nilly. We need to be mindful that these two things are meeting with an edge. And that's going to be the next thing that's going to make our lace look like lace versus not lace, right? So this edge has some softness here, and the illusion of softness here. This is actually a little bit sharp as it goes, but it's reading soft because it's really sharp in, out, in, out, in, out, in, out, right? So when you have like a really jagged edge that's tight and small, it can read like a soft edge. So we have a big challenge ahead of us here. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of lay in the color, and then we're going to start meeting these two edges in a thoughtful way to create. Okay, so the edge is a little bit harsher and certainly darker on this side over here. So I'm going to put, you know, meet these two colors a little bit more harshly, a little more sharply. And then, you know, it gets a little fuzzier as it comes around and up here. Now, it looks like this value that was put under here is just a little bit light, so I'm going to darken it slightly. So value, shape, and edge. Those are the three golden things that are going to be our focus today, because that's what's going to give us the lace effect. It's like a lake effect, except it's a lace effect. Okay. So, do. All right. Now on this side, these edges are meeting softly. So I'm going to let this edge, I'm going to push and pull it a little bit from both sides because there is some softness that's happening here. Okay. All right. Now, typically, what I would do when I'm painting is I would lay in my light, I would lay in my best guess of this edge, and then I'd do a second pass and really get into it in this kind of smaller, tighter way that we're working on today. But because we have more limited time, I'm going to take one little area a little bit tighter, and then we'll fill in these other areas a little more loosely. And that way you can see both sides of the process. Okay, so we have some softness up here. And again, if two things are meeting, they're going to create an edge. That's the rule. And not all edges are created equal. So there's a little bit of a sharpness sticking up in here. This got a little too light as I was softening that edge. Okay. Sometimes when you have a white canvas, it's really affecting what you're seeing here. So what I'm going to do, because this is mostly a solid color here, with the exception of this kind of thing coming down over here. Because this is mostly the same color here, I'm just going to get a big brush and fill this in. It's going to take away a lot of the distraction, right? Whenever you have white canvas, it's going to skew how you're viewing color. Needs a little lighter. Okay, so I'm just filling this in. I'm not worried about this part of the painting. This is just to help us see the lace more clearly. We just have such a big area in here. You know, we want to eliminate any distractions that we may find for ourselves. So we want to set ourselves up for success. So if we know that having white canvas is going to disrupt our ability to see clearly, we want to make sure that we're addressing that. All right, please make sure to ask any questions you have in the chat. I love hearing from you. I'm excited to start offering these Monday classes every Monday. So please make sure to follow and like the channel so you don't miss out on our next one. I like starting the week off with an art commitment. It's easy to put your art off all week. Be like, oh, I'll paint on the weekend, or oh, I'll get to it tomorrow. But I feel like starting Monday, it's really putting the priority in the right place at the beginning of the week, right? I try to always encourage my students, you don't have to paint lots, but try to develop the, consistency of painting. Even if you have an hour here, 20 minutes there, even if you don't feel like painting, I tell my students, just sit in front of your easel with your brush. And all you have to do is hold your brush and set a timer for 20 minutes. And after 20 minutes, you still don't feel like painting, you don't have to. But I've found in my own practice that I always start painting, just by sitting there, because you start thinking about it, you start, considering what you want to do next in your painting. And it's a great way to kind of build your discipline with painting, is sit in front of your easel for 20 minutes every day, even if you don't feel like it. That's the other advantage too of working in a class with others is that, you have a group of people that are anticipating your arrival and are cheering you on and helping you. I love teaching our online painting boot camp. Our students in there are really wonderful. Yeah, and I see our friend from Scotland saying, I have a few unfinished projects trying to get my brain to get started. It doesn't listen like a 5-year-old or teenager. You know what? I heard some great advice from a friend of mine, and it's like you have to be your own parent. Parent yourself the best that you can, right? Like, just sit in front of your easel, set a timer, like 5 minutes. Just make yourself hold a brush, and anybody can do that, right? Don't give ourselves these giant tasks like I have to paint a masterpiece today or I'm a failure. Don't make the goal I have to finish a painting. Make the goal I'm going to paint today, right? Because then you have these like smaller pieces that you can tackle at a time, and it's so much easier than being like, oh, if I don't have 5 hours I can't paint, right? And yes, this painting is in the Met Museum in New York City. It's one of my favorite paintings. I'm a huge fan of Velasquez. I love what he does with edges and color, and just the life in his paintings, the way he lays down his paint. I'm a big, big fan. Oh, excuse me. Okay. All right, let's see here. I'm starting to get sucked in over here, but this isn't important. That can be the next pass over here. I'm just trying to cover some canvas. I should have just covered this when I was mixing this paint color in last Monday's demo, but oh well. Here we are. Again, if you didn't catch us last Monday, you can see it on our YouTube channel. How I'm mixing these colors, kind of the thought process behind it. I don't want to get too close up in here because this is my big brush and this is for big ideas. We'll get into the smaller. But again, I just want to focus on this area more or less over here. That's about what we have to get done today in about an hour. Wow, it is so windy here. Can you guys hear that howling? It's like a Winnie the Pooh day, like woo. Like I live in the forest and there's a bunch of branches just scraping my windows. I should maybe trim those. But a good blustery day, good for being in the studio, good for having friends to talk to while I'm painting in the studio. I'm not alone in the scary house with the wind blowing really harshly. All right, so Rob has a question. I've always wondered how lace is painted. I assumed you painted the undercolor first, then after it's dry, you paint the white cloth and scrape the holes away. Not necessarily. And be careful about your assumption that there are holes. I'm going to bring you up really, really closely here for a minute, because it feels like there are holes, but there actually are not. There's not a single hole in here. There's a soft edge right here that could be misinterpreted as a hole. There's another soft edge right here, but there's no hole in the lace. What's making it read is how sharp it is next to something kind of soft, and the specificity of the shape. That's what's creating the lace feel. So we read it because our brains fill in the lace part, right? So our brains are doing the work for us. But what makes Velasquez such a genius is that he doesn't describe every little hole. He's not painting as if he were knitting it, the lace himself. And it's the illusion created by the contrast and the value. Excuse me. The contrast and the value, and the specificity of shape, and how the edges are meeting. Okay, and Ellen's just joined us. Welcome, Ellen. Okay, interesting. Thanks for letting me know that there was difficulty getting on the live link. I'll check that out. I am new to streaming, so I'm still figuring out how all the little pieces are working myself. So thank you for overcoming the challenge of joining us today, Ellen. It's good to see you. Absolutely, Rob. Because, we do make the assumption that there's all these little holes in lace, right? Like, oh, I'm painting lace, right? So we've put that label in our head and we want to go approach it, as with our assumptions and what we think we know about lace. And what Velasquez did so well, in that painting of his that's really famous with the spinning wheel, right? Everybody else was painting a spinning wheel by describing the whole wheel sitting in place. But what he observed is that when it's spinning, it's a soft edge. It's just a circular soft edge. And he was the first to really understand and to be a true observer of the impression versus, excuse me, this cold, I swear. Um, the impression, he was the first to understand what he was seeing with and eliminating a lot more biases than other artists had in what they were thinking about, right? Because the bias that you have, excuse me, like Durer for sure would have drawn every little hole, right? And that's not right or wrong. It's different ways to approach painting lace. And what I really wanted you to learn today is that it's not what you think it is, right? That's the goal for today. Okay. I just need a drink here. I need to sip on my coffee for a second. Okay. So again, we're going to focus, just on this one smaller area today. But it's the same concept here as it is here. The only difference here is that the lace is turning away. And do you see how the shadow in the lace becomes the same color as the light part of this dark cloth? So that's a really interesting choice that he's making here too. But he's not, turning this, he's just using like 2 brush strokes to show the shadow. And he's using just the division between light and shadow here to get us to think that the lace is crumpled and turning away on the shoulder. It's really quite genius of him. Hmm. Okay, so back to it. I'm trying to think of how far I want to go. I don't have a mark on the arm, but I'm going to use that arm as kind of my endpoint here. So I am doing a little bit of drawing. I'm looking where this is cutting through, and it looks like it's something like that. I'm just going to check the width here. So it looks like it go over just a touch. Voila. So I'm just going to paint basically until this this curve. So I'm just going to check a couple widths here. So it looks like it could go over just a touch more. Your drawing matters. This isn't a drawing lesson today, but it does matter. I teach a lot of drawing in the online boot camp. So if you're interested in learning, learning with me, learning the Atelier methods, learning how to do this from scratch without a tracing, we teach you everything that you need to know. Everybody works at their own pace in the online class, but you get to work with students. So you get to see everybody working on their own projects, but you have that community that really helps encourage and engage you. Nobody wants to show up and be the only one that doesn't have progress to share, right? So, we talked about parenting ourselves, like give yourself that nudge, join a class. It's a great way to make time for your art that's consistent, that is going to be there, that you have a little bit of that pressure you put on yourself to make sure that you're working. Okay. All right. It does get a little darker down here, but we don't want to spend all our time worrying about this because we want to focus on the lace. It's darker and a little bit more red. I love a good color movement in a painting. Things are shifting. We tend to look for the values that shift, but hues are often shifting. Neutrality is often shifting. There's a lot that actually happens at any given point in a painting. Okay. So I'm also going to do the same. Like this is more or less flat. There's a tiny bit of a color change in here, but not very much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay in the flat color, and then that way we can just really focus on this edge and shape because that's what's going to create most of our effects today. Ooh, so you see how I got dirty paint? All right. Sometimes if you get too much paint on, you can just take your palette knife, put it aside, and try again. There's nothing in painting that goes awry that you cannot correct, right? Now, sometimes uh, what's required to correct something, it's more worthwhile to start over than it is to correct it, depending on how much of a mistake it is. But everything is correctable. This is feeling a little bit on the orange side. So I'm going to mix some white and blue together, just a touch, just to cool it down. It just got like super orangey, but I want to be careful not to make it too blue either, right? So these are just small adjustments because as we know, there's no such thing as white. All right. I see here. All right. All right, so I'm just going to continue filling in the section here. Now, because we're focused on this area, it's tempting to fill all of this in. But if I fill all this in, I'm going to have to deal with the edge over here too. So I'm only going to go about this far. Keep our eye on the prize, right? Now, when I'm teaching, I'm thinking a little differently than when I'm painting for me, right? Because if I were painting for me, I would just fill all this in today and then the next day maybe work on here. But in these Monday lessons, I'm trying really hard to give you a big overriding concept to think about. And it's not, you don't need to see me do it 100 times. You need to see me do it once well, right? Okay. And I see some great chat going on here. So, um, okay, so I see Rob, sorry, Rob saying that painting lace and the sheet music from some of the still life paintings are the two mysteries. Absolutely. So we have one. Maybe next week I'll do sheet music for you, Rob. But it's the same thing. You don't want to paint every note. You want to paint the impression on the page, right? So it's almost better to think about it like a ribbon, how it comes in and out, light and dark. Paint the paper, but it just has a little bit of darkness in it that creates the illusion. If you're painting Velasquez style. Now, if you're painting like Durer or Ong, then you're going to paint every freaking note on your on your page. So it's not like there's a right and a wrong way, but this is one way of approaching lace that can really help you. And even though we're talking about lace today, right, what we're really talking about is what is the impression, right? How do we paint an impression? And yes, I see accountability friend artist, and we would paint at the same time, even though she was in Canada and I was in the UK. That is very smart. That's essentially what our online class does, right? We have people from all over the world joining us, twice a week. They get critiques from me individually on their projects. And then they're also posting, in our app, we have an app for the class. And they can post their questions in between times, and they can talk to each other and ask each other questions like, oh, who's that artist? Or sometimes the student will go to a museum and post pictures in our group chat in the class, and it's a really wonderful community. So if you're looking for a little bit of that nudge, if you're looking for that community and that consistent meeting time to work on your art, I hope you'll join us in the online atelier bootcamp. And yes, Ellen, everything's correctable. And yeah, some people, they don't like having people in their studio. Other people, like, I'm a very social painter. I love having all of you in my studio right now. I have neighbors that come by. I'm like, come talk to me when I paint. I do not like being alone in my studio. I used to have my studio in the spare bedroom, and I just hated going there. And I finally realized it's because I like to talk to people when I paint. So now my studio is in my living room so that I can have people over and be social and paint. um, oh, so Magritte has a great question. She's asking, There's a progression in art, right? It moves from more detailed to less detailed. You know, I think what you're asking is like historically through time, like how much detail put into art, into art. But I think it's a wave and a cycle that repeats. So I look at ancient art, you have like the archaic art that's a little stiffer, and then they discovered contrapposto, in the high classical era. And then it became so much about skill that they did what was called, wet drapery sculpting, where it was like, look what I can do, right? And then it like all came crumbling down for a while. And then during the Renaissance, same thing. It was simpler at first, right? And then it got more complicated. By the time you got to the Baroque era, it was like overcomplicated. And then, you had neoclassicism come in being like, no more excessive ornamentation. So I think we go through that cycle often. I look at a lot of art from the 20th century, and I see that as a purging of the highly detailed Victorian stuff, and that now people are interested in more intricate art again after a century of white canvases. People are like, oh, maybe maybe I want to look at something slightly more complicated than that. And that's where we are. That's where the Atelier land is. If you want to learn modern art, you are in the wrong channel. I believe in contemporary art. I believe in contemporary realism, but I believe in art that communicates visually. So I think that if you have to have like a written page next to your painting, it might be philosophy with an illustration, but it is no longer in the realm of visual communication, right? It's verbal communication. So for me, art means that the viewer is able to receive a visual message without outside context, that they can do it just with their eyes. All right, I'm on my soapbox. I'm going to get back to painting. Okay. So, all right, I have to finish getting this kind of wrapped up. Now, there is a little bit of modulation in the color, but that can come in the next pass. We're going to get this part to look a lot like lace just by how we meet these two colors. It's really tempting to fill this little triangle in here just because then we'll have surrounded our lace a little bit. How much time do I have? I don't have much time. Okay, forget the triangle. We don't have time for that. But we are going to continue. We're just, now that we have this color and this color, we're just going to continue doing this edge work around the side here. So again, there's a little bit going on here. Now, Velasquez used a little bit of what's called a dry brush, which would require us to let this dry and come back to it. We can slightly mimic that effect by just allowing the paint to pull in. It's not a true dry brush, but it'll give us a comparable edge here. Okay, and again, this isn't a hole, it's a value, right? But isn't it amazing how just getting one edge to meet another edge can create some of our effects here? Hello, everyone. I am not sure if this is still going or not. My apologies. The wind completely knocked out my power here. Uh, so please let me know in the chat if you can hear me. If I have no idea if this is still streaming or not. I do see some chat going on. Oh, I'm back. I'm back. Yes, I apologize. The windstorm knocked out the power and then the backup power came on, but it kicked me out. Yay, I'm back. All right, so we have just a couple more minutes. To work on this today. We might have to finish this next Monday. This might be a two-part lace situation instead of one. Hey, Kay and Maine, glad to have you here. I'm sorry, everybody. We'll get back to it right away now. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is that the way we meet these two edges are what matters when we are painting here. I'm actually going to bring you guys a little closer if I can. It's always a challenge to get you close without suffocating myself. Like I need space to fit between you and the easel. Ellen's saying you can paint all day, Mandy. I have time. And hi, Patrick. You're very welcome. I love doing these videos. Thank you. I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad that you found us. If you like learning from me, I hope you'll consider joining our online painting bootcamp. We have a great group of students in there. It's $500 a month, and you get critiques from me 2 times a week. You can also, you have access to me in the chat to ask me questions while you're working on your projects. And we have a great group of students in there. I can tell a lot of people here have been following me, for a while, showing up to every one of these classes. Like, take it to the next level. It might be time for you. All right. What am I doing here? Okay, so I need my dark. Okay, so, again, oops. I had the adrenaline going, trying to get my internet back on as quickly as I could. I'm like, no. There's a touch of red in here, which is just really nice. People really underestimate the reds and the greens, but it's really what makes a beautiful green different from a meh green. Okay. We need to cover up in here. All right, so one thing at a time. First, I'm going to think about shape, and then I'm going to think about edge. So again, do not genericize. This is its own shape, and it's different from this shape, right? I guess this is the shape we were working on before that I didn't finish, so maybe I should do this one first. Sorry. Let me turn off that alarm. Okay. I'm just full of chaos, but you know what? This is why we paint on Mondays. Get all the chaos out on Monday. Fall into your painting habit by Tuesday and Wednesday. In the online boot camp, we meet first thing Monday morning, 8 a.m. on Monday morning, and then 3 p.m. on Thursday. We do add critique times based on student needs. Okay, so a little bit of detail here, but it's not holes. And then this soft edge over here, and I can bring the white all the way down to meet this edge here. And of course, when I say white, I don't really mean white. I mean the really light value neutralized orange that we mixed. Okay. I'm going to do the same here. Just bring it down, meet the edge, because when we meet the edge, then we can determine what to do with the edge. Right, so there's a little bit of dry brush situation going on. This isn't a true dry brush because this is wet into wet, but you can create a similar effect just by dragging your light color into your dark color here. That was I overreached into my dark. I'm gonna push back from the other side, which is fine because this is a soft edge anyways. And this dark kind of sneaks up a little bit. Okay, now it's easy for things to grow and get bigger, especially when you're working on them. So we want to make sure that we're thinking about the shape, making sure that it's not getting too big, too small. I feel like this could actually go darker. It has a little bit of a darkness in here that's really part of the effect. You know, people sometimes think, oh, I made something the wrong shape, when the real issue is that they don't have the right value next to it and it's affecting the way that the shape feels. Okay. So you can see I'm fussing with this. I'm pushing it back and forth a little bit. You know, I'm trying to get this effect that we see here. Now it feels like it got a little bit short. So it feels like this needs to push out just a little bit more. And again, we do have a sharp edge at the very end here that's kind of pushing in a little bit this way. You know, but it's not as much as people think. People really exaggerate these things. We're not making holes. Okay, so we've now, I'm going to pull you up really close to this. So what I hope you can see here, it's so hard, is that, you know, we've done one area and we've really created the shape and the edge work, and that's what's going to give us the believability. Now, I'm feeling like this needs a little bit more warmth. We originally said that this was a neutralized orange, and you know what the difference between this and this right now is that there isn't enough warmth down here. So I'm going to add that warmth now. You know, you can't really tell a true color till you get everything around it in, right? So you make your best guess and then you adjust your best guess when you get more information. That's how we all live life, presumably, right? We give it our best go. We learn sometimes. All right, so we got a little bit of warmth in there. Feel like it could be a touch darker. Oh, that was not what I wanted. Oops, I just lost the shape just now. Because, you know, this little swoop-de-doo in here is a big part of what's making this feel. And back to softening. This got way too harsh up here. I could fuss with this all day. Okay. All right. So again, apologies for the little disruption earlier, but we're going to stop there for today. Thank you all for coming. I hope you learned a little bit something about lace. Oh, I have a question in the chat. Where did I get this copy? I am such a terrible person. You guys are probably not going to watch my channel ever again, but I often buy large print books and I cut out the pages. So I believe that's where I got this print from, was a book. So if you go to library book sales, a lot of these books go to the dump if you don't get them anyways. So, it's hard, but I get a lot more use out of these images out of the book than I do in the book. I don't look at them when they're in the book. I paint them all the time when they're out of the book. Thank you so much for being here today. I really enjoyed working with you. Again, apologies for the disruption. Make sure to like and follow this channel so you don't miss our other free classes. I encourage you to join our newsletter as well. And I am working on providing all this content in a space that doesn't have ads. So I'm working on putting that together for you and hope to have that available next week as well. So good things are coming from the School of Atelier Arts. I love learning with you. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you next Monday.